5 travelers. 1 Jeep Wagoneer. 18 days, 6,326 kilometers, and an unforgettable journey through the American West. Our adventure began on June 26, 2026, when we set off on a road trip across the western United States. We picked up our Jeep Wagoneer and started our journey through some of the most spectacular landscapes in America. During the next 18 days, we visited several national parks, drove through vast deserts and mountain landscapes, and experienced places we had previously known only from movies and photographs. One of the highlights was the legendary Area 51, one of the most mysterious places in the United States. And then there was Las Vegas, bright, noisy, extravagant, and completely different from everything we had seen on the road. But our trip was not only about cities and famous landmarks. The national parks were among the greatest experiences of the entire journey. Endless roads, dramatic rock formations, deep canyons, huge mountains, and landscapes that seemed almost unreal. Every day brought something new. After thousands of kilometers on the road, we reached San Francisco, one of the most famous cities on the American West Coast. We saw the Golden Gate Bridge, explored the city, and enjoyed the atmosphere of this unique place. And finally, we arrived in Los Angeles, the last major stop on our journey. From the deserts of Nevada and Utah to the Pacific coast of California, we experienced an incredible variety of landscapes and places. 6,326 kilometers later, our road trip came to an end. 18 days. 5 travelers. 1 Jeep Wagoneer. Our first major stop was Joshua Tree National Park. As we left the city behind, the landscape began to change. The roads stretched out into the desert, surrounded by endless open space, huge boulders, and strange-looking Joshua trees. It felt like we had suddenly entered another world. We stopped at several viewpoints and explored the unique desert landscape on foot. The Joshua trees themselves were something we had never seen before, twisted, unusual, and scattered across the desert as far as we could see. And then there were the rocks. Huge granite formations rising from the desert, shaped by millions of years of wind and weather. It was our first real taste of the American Southwest, wild, vast, and completely different from anything we knew from Europe. After leaving Joshua Tree, we continued east and made a stop at an old western town. It felt like stepping back in time, wooden buildings, dusty streets, and the atmosphere of the Wild West. From there, we made our way to the legendary Route 66. Known as the Mother Road, Route 66 once connected Chicago with Los Angeles and became one of the symbols of the American road trip. We followed this historic road further east, surrounded by the vast Arizona desert. Our next stop was Oatman, a small former mining town that has kept much of its Old West character. But Oatman has another very special attraction. Its streets are home to wild burros, descendants of the donkeys once used by miners in this area. And, of course, we couldn't just walk past them. We stopped, fed them, and quickly made some new friends. Some were friendly, some were a little more demanding. But all of them seemed to know exactly who was carrying the food. Oatman was a short stop, but definitely one of the most memorable and unexpected moments of our journey. And then it was time to get back on the road and continue east along the historic Route 66. As we continued our journey through Arizona, we had an unexpected encounter even before reaching the Grand Canyon. Along the road, we spotted a doe, a female deer, standing quietly in the landscape. It was a brief moment, but it reminded us that we were traveling through a truly wild part of the country. And then we finally arrived at the Grand Canyon. There are places you see in photographs so many times that you think you already know what they will look like. But the Grand Canyon is different. Nothing really prepares you for the first view. We walked up to the edge, and suddenly the landscape opened up in front of us, an enormous canyon stretching for miles in every direction. The Colorado River, which carved this incredible landscape over millions of years, was far below us. The scale was difficult to comprehend. The canyon walls revealed layer after layer of rock, each one telling a story of an ancient landscape shaped by time, water, wind, and erosion. We stopped at several viewpoints, each offering a completely different perspective. Sometimes the canyon appeared massive and powerful, and from another viewpoint, it seemed almost peaceful and endless. We spent time simply looking out across the landscape, taking photographs, and trying to capture something that is almost impossible to capture on camera. The Grand Canyon was one of those places where we didn't need to say much. We could just stand there and take it all in. After everything we had seen so far, this was one of the true highlights of our journey through the American West. And there was still a long road ahead of us. Our next stop was Glen Canyon Dam, an impressive piece of engineering on the Colorado River. The massive concrete dam creates Lake Powell and rises high above the canyon. From the viewpoints, we could see the enormous scale of the dam and the surrounding red rock landscape. A little later, we reached the historic Navajo bridges. Two bridges spanned the deep marble canyon, carrying the road high above the Colorado River. We stopped for a short walk and enjoyed the spectacular views of the canyon and the river far below. Horseshoe Bend is one of the most spectacular viewpoints along the Colorado River. The river makes a dramatic horseshoe-shaped turn around the red sandstone cliffs, creating an almost perfect natural curve. From the viewpoint high above the river, the scale of the landscape is breathtaking, and the beauty of the American Southwest continued. After Horseshoe Bend, we entered Upper Antelope Canyon, a place that was every bit as breathtaking and perhaps even more spectacular. The moment we stepped inside, the landscape changed completely. The narrow canyon walls rise high above us, their smooth curves and flowing shapes created by water and wind over thousands of years. The sandstone seems to move around you, with every curve creating a new shape and a different perspective. And then there is the light. Sunlight entering through the narrow opening above creates beautiful patterns across the walls, constantly changing as the sun moves across the sky. The colors range from deep orange and red to warm golden shades, making the canyon look almost unreal. It was difficult to decide where to look first, and even more difficult to capture the atmosphere on camera. After the vast landscapes of the Grand Canyon and Horseshoe Bend, Antelope Canyon offered something completely different. Instead of looking across a huge landscape, we were surrounded by it. It was one of the most beautiful and memorable places we visited during our journey through the American West. And from the narrow walls of Antelope Canyon, we continued toward one of the most iconic landscapes of the American West, Monument Valley. As we approached, the scenery began to change once again. The flat desert stretched out before us, and the famous red rock formations gradually appeared on the horizon. Monument Valley is instantly recognizable. Its enormous sandstone buttes rise dramatically from the desert floor, creating a landscape that looks almost unreal. Some of these formations rise nearly 300 meters above the surrounding desert. And what makes them even more remarkable is how they were formed. Millions of years ago, this entire area was covered by layers of sedimentary rock. Over an incredibly long period of time, wind and water slowly eroded the softer rock around them, leaving behind the harder sandstone formations we see today. The result is a landscape of enormous isolated buttes, mesas, and cliffs standing above the flat desert floor. This is the America we have seen so many times on screen. Monument Valley has been used as a backdrop for countless movies and commercials, and it became especially famous through Western films. One of the most memorable connections is the classic movie Once Upon a Time in the West, directed by Sergio Leone. The valley has also become closely associated with the iconic Marlboro advertising campaigns, with the vast desert landscape and the image of the American cowboy becoming symbols of the American West. Standing here, it was easy to understand why this landscape has inspired filmmakers and photographers for decades. We drove through the valley, surrounded by enormous red rock formations, endless desert, and a huge open sky. Every turn seemed to reveal another postcard-perfect view. After seeing so many of these landscapes in movies, photographs, and advertisements, experiencing Monument Valley in person was something completely different. For a moment, it really felt like we had stepped into a movie. This was the American West we had imagined, and it was even more impressive in reality.
Já chci vidět celý ten hub, tyhle, tady ten. Ale. Ale jsou krásný, fakt jsou hezký.
Just a short drive from Monument Valley, we came to one of the most famous roads in the American West, the place known as Forrest Gump Point. This is where the long, straight highway stretches almost perfectly toward the red rock formations of Monument Valley. The location became famous after appearing in the movie Forrest Gump, when Forrest suddenly decides to stop running and turns around, ending his long journey across America. Standing in the middle of this road, with Monument Valley in the distance, we could immediately recognize the famous scene. It was one of those places where a simple stretch of road becomes something special because of the story connected to it. Of course, we couldn't resist taking our own version of the famous Forrest Gump photo. A short stop, but definitely one of the most recognizable moments of our road trip. Our journey continued to Arches National Park, a landscape so spectacular that it has even appeared on the big screen. The opening scene of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was filmed here, with the dramatic red rock landscape providing the perfect setting for the young Indiana Jones adventure. And once we entered the park, it was easy to understand why filmmakers are drawn to this place. Arches National Park is home to more than 2,000 natural sandstone arches, created over millions of years by erosion, wind, water, and the extreme desert climate.
Těch je tady spousta. To je stopka jako při výjezdu.
One of the most famous is Delicate Arch. Standing high above the surrounding landscape, this enormous natural arch has become a symbol of Utah and one of the most recognizable landmarks in the entire American West. From a distance, it almost looks too perfectly shaped to be natural. Another fascinating formation is Balanced Rock, a huge boulder seemingly balanced on top of a much narrower column of sandstone. It looks as though the slightest push could bring the whole thing down. But after surviving thousands of years of erosion, it is still standing. And finally, we reached Double Arch. Unlike Delicate Arch, which stands alone against the sky, Double Arch consists of two enormous arches joined together at their base. Standing underneath them gives a completely different impression of their enormous size. The sandstone walls rise high above us, and looking up at the two arches, it was hard to believe that they were created entirely by nature. Arches National Park was another reminder that the American West is full of landscapes that seem almost impossible, yet they are completely real. And every few kilometers, there was another incredible formation waiting around the corner. After all the spectacular landscapes and natural wonders, it was time for something a little more prehistoric. We visited Moab Giants, a dinosaur park just outside Moab. And, of course, we couldn't resist the opportunity to take a few photos with the dinosaurs. Some of us tried to look brave. Others decided that the best strategy was to become friends with them. And, naturally, there was plenty of posing, with dinosaurs chasing us, eating us, and even joining us for a few rather ridiculous group photos. It was great fun, and definitely one of the lighter moments of our journey. But there is actually much more to Moab Giants than just giant dinosaur models. The area is part of a real dinosaur fossil region, where scientists have discovered dinosaur bones and thousands of fossilized footprints. So while our dinosaur encounters were mostly for fun, the dinosaurs really did walk around this landscape millions of years ago. In a way, we weren't just taking pictures with dinosaurs. We were following in their footsteps. After leaving Moab, we continued toward another extraordinary landscape, Bryce Canyon National Park. At first glance, Bryce Canyon looks completely different from the places we had visited before. Instead of massive cliffs or huge rock arches, the canyon is filled with thousands of tall, thin rock formations known as hoodoos. They rise from the ground like an enormous stone forest, with their orange, red, and white colors changing constantly with the sunlight. These strange formations were created over millions of years by erosion, especially by the repeated freezing and thawing of water inside cracks in the rock. The result is a landscape that looks almost unreal. We walked along the rim and stopped at several viewpoints, where the entire amphitheater opened up in front of us. From above, the hoodoos seemed to stretch endlessly into the distance. And when we looked down into the canyon, it was hard to believe that all of these delicate-looking formations had been shaped entirely by nature. We also experienced Bryce Canyon in different ways. Part of our group decided to hike all the way down into the canyon, getting much closer to the hoodoos and experiencing the landscape from below. Another part of the group chose a different trail and went part of the way down enough to get a completely different perspective, but without going all the way to the bottom. And some of us were perfectly happy to stay up on the rim and enjoy the spectacular views from above. Everyone chose their own adventure. And the best part was that, in the end, everyone was happy. Whether we were down among the hoodoos or simply enjoying the view from the top, Bryce Canyon was an unforgettable experience for all of us. Bryce Canyon may not be the largest national park we visited, but it was certainly one of the most unusual. Everywhere we looked, there was another shape, another color, and another incredible view. It was yet another reminder that the American West never seems to run out of surprises. Leaving Bryce Canyon behind, we continued our journey toward Zion National Park. But the road had one more surprise in store for us. As we were driving along, we suddenly spotted a herd of bison surprisingly close to the road. They were grazing around a ranch where the animals are raised, but seeing such large animals so close to us was still quite unexpected. Of course, we had to slow down and stop for a while to watch them. It was an unexpected encounter and a great reminder that on an American road trip, you never quite know what you are going to find around the next corner. After a short but memorable bison stop, we continued on toward Zion. Unlike some of the other parks we had visited, Zion is dominated by enormous cliffs rising almost vertically from the valley. The main road through the canyon is closed to most private cars during the busy season, so we used the park shuttle buses to get around. They took us comfortably between the main stops and trailheads, allowing us to concentrate on the scenery instead of looking for parking. One of the most famous hikes in Zion follows the Virgin River deep into the canyon. We started along the trail and enjoyed the spectacular walls rising on both sides of us. The most famous part continues directly through the river, with visitors walking through the water between the towering canyon walls. We decided not to go that far. There were simply too many people, and the narrow river section was extremely crowded. Instead, we chose another shorter trail leading beneath one of Zion's impressive rock overhangs. It was a completely different experience, still spectacular, but much more comfortable and with fewer people around us. After the hike, we stopped for lunch at a local restaurant and then headed out again for a longer afternoon walk. This time, we followed a trail toward a waterfall in the lower and middle pools. The further we walked, the quieter it became. And eventually, something rather unusual happened. We were completely alone. After the crowds on the famous trail, having the canyon almost entirely to ourselves felt fantastic. We could hear the water, enjoy the scenery, and simply take our time without having to constantly avoid other hikers. The waterfall and the pools were surrounded by the enormous cliffs of Zion, making the whole place feel almost hidden. For us, this quieter part of the park became one of the highlights of our visit. Zion showed us two very different sides of itself, the famous, spectacular places filled with visitors, and the quieter trails where we could experience the beauty of the canyon almost completely alone. And sometimes, those quieter moments are the ones you remember the longest. At one point, we decided to make a little detour into one of the most mysterious places in America, the legendary Area 51. The journey itself was already an experience. Along the way, we discovered some rather unusual roadside stops, filled with UFOs, aliens, space-themed souvenirs, and, of course, plenty of stories about things that supposedly happen out here in the desert. One of the most interesting places was the famous Little Island in the tiny town of Rachel. The atmosphere here was exactly what we had hoped for. The staff were incredibly friendly and very happy to talk to visitors about UFOs, unexplained events, and the strange stories associated with the area. They even showed us a scrapbook full of newspaper clippings and stories about mysterious incidents that people claim have happened around Area 51. Whether you believe any of it or not, it certainly makes for entertaining reading. And there was plenty of humor too. An agent armed with an air pistol, looking like one of the men in black, was taking aim at alien invaders disguised as flies. Even the drinks looked as if they had come straight from another planet. Some of the cocktails were glowing in the dark, adding to the feeling that we had definitely entered alien territory. Of course, we couldn't leave without leaving a message for the extraterrestrials. We stopped at the legendary Black Mailbox, a famous landmark along the road to Area 51, and left our own message for whoever might be watching. And then came the moment we had been waiting for. Our Jeep Wagoneer left the paved road and proved that it was perfectly capable of handling an unmarked desert track. We followed the rough road deeper into the desert until we reached a heavily guarded gate leading toward Area 51. We didn't stay there for long. After all, we didn't want to attract too much attention from the people behind the fence. So we quickly turned the Jeep around and headed back toward the main road. And then we accelerated away, destination Las Vegas. Whether Area 51 is hiding aliens, secret aircraft, or simply a very good story, we decided it was probably better not to ask too many questions. We arrived in Las Vegas in the afternoon. Our first stop was a famous pawn shop, well known from the television series Pawn Stars. The shop has become a Las Vegas attraction in its own right, and it was interesting to see the place where so many unusual and valuable items have been brought in over the years. From there, we headed to one of the city's oldest wedding chapels. Las Vegas is famous for its quick and sometimes rather unconventional weddings, and this particular chapel has hosted many celebrities over the years, including Bryan Adams. It was a fun reminder that in Las Vegas, almost anything can become part of a story. As the sun began to set, we made our way past the spectacular sphere. Even from the outside, this enormous spherical building is impossible to miss, especially when its huge LED screen is illuminated with constantly changing images. From there, we continued toward Fremont Street, right in the heart of old Las Vegas. Fremont Street is the historic center of the city and, in many ways, the place where modern Las Vegas began. Today, the street is covered by an enormous LED canopy stretching for several blocks. After dark, the canopy comes alive with spectacular light shows, music, and constantly changing animations above the crowds below. The street itself is packed with casinos, bars, restaurants, street performers, and all kinds of entertainment. There is also the famous Slotzilla zipline, which sends visitors flying above the crowds beneath the giant canopy. Compared with the huge resorts of the Las Vegas Strip, Fremont Street feels more compact, more chaotic, and perhaps a little more authentic. It has a completely different atmosphere, loud, colorful, slightly crazy, and unmistakably Las Vegas. And this was only our first afternoon and evening in the city. The following morning, we left Las Vegas behind and headed toward one of the greatest engineering achievements in the American West, Hoover Dam. The massive concrete dam was built during the Great Depression and was completed in 1936. Standing on top of the dam, we could really appreciate its enormous scale. The dam rises more than 220 meters above the Colorado River and created Lake Mead, one of the largest reservoirs in the United States. We walked across the famous dam and stopped several times to take in the views of the river, the reservoir, and the surrounding desert landscape. Hoover Dam has also become a familiar sight on the big screen. It appeared in The Hangover Part 3, connecting it to the world of the Hangover films, as well as in Superman and Universal Soldier. The dam and its surroundings have also featured in numerous other movies and television productions over the years. Standing there, it was easy to see why filmmakers loved this location. The afternoon brought another unique Las Vegas experience. Half of our group headed to the Sphere to see The Wizard of Oz. Watching a classic story inside one of the world's most spectacular entertainment venues was an experience in itself. The Sphere's enormous screen and immersive technology make it feel as if you are not simply watching a movie or a show, you are actually inside it. While half of the group was enjoying the show, the rest of us had some time to explore the city. Later that evening, we all met up again and set off on a tour of some of the most famous casinos on the Las Vegas Strip. We visited the Venetian, Caesar's Palace, Bellagio, and several other legendary resorts. Each one seemed to be trying to outdo the others. Inside the casinos, everything is designed to impress: enormous lobbies, extravagant decorations, fountains, shops, restaurants, and, of course, thousands of slot machines. And speaking of slot machines, I personally managed to win $3 at the Bellagio. $3 whole. Naturally, this was far too important to leave behind. So I went to the casino cashier to collect my winnings. The fact that I actually went through all that trouble to cash out $3 provided plenty of entertainment for everyone around me.
Tak co? Je smutnej.
But that night had an even bigger surprise in store. It was Independence Day, the 4th of July, and Las Vegas was celebrating in spectacular style. We watched the official fireworks from the rooftops of 5 different casinos, with the entire strip lighting up around us. And in front of the Bellagio, the famous fountains put on a special Independence Day show. The water, lights, and music were all presented in the colors of the American flag, accompanied by a spectacular arrangement inspired by the American national anthem. With fireworks exploding above the city and the Bellagio fountains performing below, it was a truly unforgettable Las Vegas night. It was hard to imagine a more American way to spend the 4th of July. From Las Vegas, we headed into one of the most extreme places in North America, Death Valley. Even a short walk onto the vast salt flats gave us a sense of just how harsh this environment can be. At the visitor center, the thermometer showed 44 degrees Celsius, 111 degrees Fahrenheit. Definitely hot enough for a quick photo, and not much more. We also stopped at an abandoned mine, a reminder of the prospectors who once came here searching for valuable minerals in this unforgiving landscape. And then there were the sand dunes. Golden waves of sand stretching across the desert, surrounded by mountains in almost complete silence. We didn't stay too long. In 44-degree heat, even the most beautiful landscape has a way of reminding you when it's time to get back into the air conditioning. The warnings around Death Valley were impossible to miss. Signs along the way reminded visitors that the extreme heat can be deadly and advised people to spend as little time outside as possible. Some even warned that staying outside for more than 10 minutes could be dangerous in these conditions. From the extreme heat of Death Valley, we continued toward a completely different world, Sequoia National Park. And here, the scale of nature changed dramatically. The giant sequoias are among the largest trees on Earth, and standing next to them makes you realize just how small we really are. Our first encounters with these giants were already impressive, but then we came face to face with General Sherman, the most massive known single-stem tree on Earth. Its enormous trunk rises high above us, and its sheer size is difficult to capture in a photograph. Along the trails, we discovered many other giant sequoias, including the impressive Chief Sequoia. We continued along the trail through groups of these ancient trees, including the famous Senate and other giant sequoias. Walking among them was a completely different experience from anything we had seen in the desert. The forest was quiet, cool, and almost magical. We also came across fallen sequoias, and even these enormous trees remain impressive after they have fallen. In one place, we could actually walk through a huge fallen trunk. And then came one of the more unusual experiences of the day, driving through a tunnel cut into a fallen sequoia. It was a perfect reminder of just how enormous these trees can be. Some of the sequoias we saw have been standing here for thousands of years. They have survived fires, storms, droughts, and countless generations of people. After days of deserts, canyons, and red rock landscapes, walking among these giants felt like entering another world. The American West had once again surprised us, this time not with something vast and empty, but with something incredibly old, enormous, and alive. From the giant sequoias, we continued to Yosemite National Park, another legendary landscape of the American West. As we entered Yosemite Valley, the enormous granite cliffs immediately caught our attention. One of the most famous is El Capitan, a gigantic granite monolith rising more than 900 meters above the valley floor. And opposite it stands Half Dome, perhaps the most recognizable symbol of Yosemite. We stopped at several viewpoints to admire these incredible rock formations and the valley stretching between them. From there, we set off on a walk toward one of Yosemite's famous waterfalls. The sound of the water and the spectacular cliffs surrounding the trail made the walk especially enjoyable. After the waterfall, we chose a shorter trail through the valley, taking in the scenery at a more relaxed pace. By then, we had definitely earned some lunch. After a break and something to eat, we continued to one of the most famous viewpoints in Yosemite. And once again, Half Dome appeared in the distance, rising dramatically above the valley. It was one of those views that makes you stop for a moment and simply look. Yosemite brought together everything we had experienced on the journey so far: enormous mountains, spectacular rock formations, waterfalls, forests, and breathtaking views. After Yosemite, we continued toward the Pacific coast and finally reached San Francisco. It was already evening when we arrived, but we didn't want to risk missing one of the city's most famous landmarks. We had no idea what the weather would be like the following day, so we decided to drive straight to the Golden Gate Bridge. and it was definitely worth it. As the evening light began to fade, the bridge appeared above the bay, creating one of those views we had been looking forward to throughout the entire trip. It was a great first glimpse of San Francisco. After that, we headed to our hotel, located right beneath another famous San Francisco landmark, the Transamerica Pyramid. The iconic pyramid-shaped skyscraper towered above us as we checked in for the night. The following morning, we explored San Francisco on foot, starting with one of the city's most colorful and historic neighborhoods, Chinatown. Walking through the narrow streets, surrounded by Chinese shops, restaurants, markets, and traditional decorations, it felt like entering a completely different world. From Chinatown, we headed to one of San Francisco's most iconic experiences, the cable car. We started at the famous manual cable car turnaround, where the historic cars are still turned around by hand. We climbed aboard and enjoyed the classic ride through the steep streets of the city. From there, we continued to Pier 39, one of San Francisco's most popular waterfront attractions. And, of course, we couldn't miss the famous sea lions. Several of them were relaxing on the floating docks, barking, arguing, and generally enjoying life while hundreds of tourists watched them. Next came Lombard Street, famous for its steep and famously winding section with 8 sharp hairpin turns. The street was designed this way to make the steep hill safer for cars to drive down. Today, it has become one of San Francisco's most photographed streets. With its colorful flowers, brick paving, and beautifully maintained houses, it is hard to resist stopping for a photo even if the drive down takes only a few seconds. Still, our Jeep made it through, and without scratching a single flower pot. We continued to the Palace of Fine Arts, one of the most beautiful and unusual buildings in the city. Its enormous classical columns and domed structure create a completely different atmosphere from the surrounding modern city. Another memorable stop was the famous row of colorful Victorian houses, with the San Francisco skyline rising behind them. It is one of those views that looks almost too perfect, the brightly painted houses in the foreground and the city's skyscrapers in the distance. And finally, we returned to the Golden Gate Bridge. This time, we actually drove across the bridge. On the other side, we stopped at a viewpoint and were lucky enough to see the bridge illuminated by the warm afternoon sun. The famous orange-red towers stood out against the blue sky in the bay below. After seeing the Golden Gate Bridge the evening before, this was the perfect second look and probably the most beautiful view we had of it during our entire trip. In the evening, we took a boat around the island of Alcatraz, giving us a spectacular view of the prison from the water. The island has a dark and fascinating history, and seeing the prison rising above the bay made it easy to understand why Alcatraz became known as one of the most notorious prisons in America. We went inside the famous prison and followed the stories of some of its most infamous inmates. One of them was Al Capone, the legendary Chicago gangster who spent several years here. But perhaps the most fascinating story is the famous escape of 1962. 3 prisoners, Frank Morrison brothers John and Clarence Anglin, disappeared from their cells after carefully preparing an elaborate escape. They left behind dummy heads in their beds and escaped through openings they had secretly enlarged behind the ventilation grills. Their improvised raft was made from raincoats, and they disappeared into the cold waters of San Francisco Bay. No one knows for certain what happened to them. The FBI officially concluded that they most likely drowned, but their bodies were never found. This has left open the possibility that they actually survived, making it perhaps the most famous unsolved prison escape in American history. The story later inspired the movie Escape from Alcatraz, starring Clint Eastwood. After our evening on Alcatraz, we returned to the hotel in a Waymo autonomous taxi. In San Francisco, this is already becoming a perfectly normal way to get around the city. For us Europeans, however, it was something completely different. Sitting in a car with no driver, watching it navigate the streets, traffic lights, pedestrians, and other vehicles completely on its own was an incredible experience. There was nobody behind the steering wheel. The car simply knew where to go, made its own decisions, and smoothly took us through the city traffic. For us, this was far more than just a convenient ride back to the hotel. It was one of the most impressive technological experiences of our entire trip, and definitely one of the moments we will remember for a very long time. Something that may already feel completely normal in San Francisco still felt like science fiction to us. Leaving San Francisco behind, we headed into Silicon Valley, the place that has become synonymous with technology, innovation, and some of the world's most influential companies. Our first stop was the Google Visitor Experience. Here, we could get a glimpse into the world of Google, learn more about its products and technology, and see how the company presents its vision of the future. Continuing south along the Pacific coast, we made a short stop in Monterey. We took a walk around the waterfront and enjoyed the relaxed atmosphere of this historic coastal town. Of course, we couldn't miss the famous Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, a fun reminder of the movie Forrest Gump. But the real stars of Monterey were out in the water. We watched sea otters floating on their backs, diving, playing, and generally having a great time. Their playful behavior was impossible to ignore and definitely made this short stop in Monterey even more memorable. From Monterey, we continued south along the legendary Pacific Coast Highway. It was a long drive, but the road itself was part of the experience. We stopped at the famous Bixby Creek Bridge, one of the most recognizable landmarks along the California coast. The bridge, surrounded by steep cliffs and the ocean, offered another spectacular view and a perfect opportunity to stop and take a few photographs. On one side, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly into the distance, while on the other, dramatic cliffs and rugged coastline accompanied us for mile after mile. After many hours on the road, we finally reached Los Angeles late at night. It had been a long day, but our Jeep Wagoneer had brought us all the way down the California coast. We checked into our hotel on Northwestern Avenue and finally called it a day. But there was no time to sleep in. Early the next morning, we set off across Los Angeles, driving along a huge 16-lane freeway toward Long Beach. The scale of the highway and the traffic was impressive in itself. In Long Beach, we took a walk along the beautifully landscaped waterfront and enjoyed the relaxed atmosphere by the ocean. But we hadn't come just for the beach. We boarded a boat and headed out into the Pacific in search of whales and dolphins. We didn't manage to spot any whales, but the dolphins more than made up for it. Soon, we found ourselves surrounded by entire pods of dolphins, swimming and playing right next to the boat. They raced alongside us, jumped out of the water, and seemed completely unbothered by the people watching them from above. At times, they were so close that it felt as if they were putting on a show just for us. No whales this time, but with dolphins like these, we certainly weren't disappointed. Back on the waterfront, we had a chance to see two remarkable ships with very different histories. The first was the Queen Mary, the legendary ocean liner that is now permanently docked in Long Beach. We only admired her from the shore, but even from a distance, her enormous size and elegant shape were impressive. Then we drove to the other side of the harbor to see something completely different, the USS Iowa, one of the most famous battleships ever built by the United States Navy. The Iowa served in World War II, the Korean War, and later during the Cold War. This time, we went aboard and explored the ship in detail. We walked through the huge gun turrets, the command areas, crew quarters, kitchens, corridors, and many of the working spaces hidden inside the enormous steel hull. Seeing the ship from the inside gave us a completely different impression of its scale. It wasn't just a massive warship, it was practically a floating city, with everything needed to accommodate and operate with a crew of thousands. Walking through the narrow corridors and steep stairways, it was easy to imagine what life must have been like for the sailors who lived and worked here. The huge guns, thick armor, machinery, and countless details of everyday life made the USS Iowa one of the most impressive historical experiences of our trip. On the second to last day of our journey, we left the car behind and took the metro to Hollywood Boulevard. We started at the famous Dolby Theater, where the Academy Awards are presented every year. Walking along the Hollywood Walk of Fame, we admired the thousands of stars dedicated to famous actors, musicians, and other celebrities. Nearby, at the TCL Chinese Theater, we found something even more interesting for us, the famous hand and footprints of Hollywood stars preserved in the concrete. And here we could recognize several actors we had already mentioned earlier in our journey, including some of the stars connected with the movies and places we had visited along the way. From Hollywood Boulevard, we continued on a drive through Hollywood and up to a viewpoint overlooking the famous Hollywood sign. Seeing those three giant letters above the city was a perfect reminder that we had finally reached the heart of the movie world. From Hollywood, we continued to Beverly Hills. The area is famous for its luxurious homes, palm-lined streets, and, of course, Rodeo Drive, one of the world's most famous shopping streets. We also visited locations associated with one of our favorite movies, Pretty Woman. We stopped outside the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, made famous by the film as the hotel where Vivian and Edward stay. Standing there, we couldn't resist remembering some of the most famous scenes from the movie. After all the national parks, deserts, canyons, and long drives, our final days in California brought us into another kind of America, the glamorous world of Hollywood and Beverly Hills. Our final full day in Los Angeles took us to the Pacific Coast, starting at the famous Venice Beach. The atmosphere here was completely different from Beverly Hills. Along the beach, we saw the legendary outdoor sports courts, where basketball, volleyball, and other sports are played right next to the ocean. Venice Beach is famous for its relaxed and slightly eccentric atmosphere, with street performers, skaters, artists, and people simply enjoying the California sunshine. From the beach, we walked into the peaceful Venice canals. The canals, lined with beautiful houses and crossed by small bridges, are a surprising contrast to the busy beach just a few minutes away. From Venice, we continued along the coast to Santa Monica. We walked along the famous pier, with the Pacific Ocean stretching out in front of us and the city behind us. And then we reached a symbolic milestone in our journey. At the Santa Monica Pier, we found the famous end of the trail sign marking the western end of historic Route 66. After following parts of Route 66 earlier in our journey, it was quite special to finally reach its western endpoint. But our journey wasn't over quite yet. We still had one more day in Los Angeles and one final chapter of our American adventure waiting for us.
No.
Our very last day in Los Angeles began at Griffith Observatory, high above the city. From the terrace, we had a spectacular view over Los Angeles, with the Hollywood sign clearly visible in the distance. The observatory itself is one of the city's most famous landmarks and has appeared in numerous movies and television series. But this time, we were not only looking for famous buildings.
Tady z té ulice to je asi hodně hodně pěkný.
And then we made a rather unusual final stop, one of the oldest surviving McDonald's restaurants. It was a small reminder of how much American culture has changed over the decades. And now, after 18 days, our journey through the American West was finally coming to an end. 5 travelers, 1 Jeep Wagoneer, and 6,326 kilometers on the road. We crossed deserts, mountains, forests, and some of the most spectacular national parks in the United States. We stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon, walked among giant sequoias, explored the strange landscapes of Bryce Canyon, Zion, Arches, and Yosemite, and experienced the heat of Death Valley. We followed historic Route 66, visited the mysterious Area 51, stood on Hoover Dam, and spent time in the bright lights of Las Vegas. We explored San Francisco, crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, visited Alcatraz, experienced a driverless Waymo, and discovered the world of Silicon Valley. And finally, we reached Los Angeles, Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Venice Beach, and Santa Monica, the western end of Route 66. Along the way, we saw places we had known from movies, met unexpected animals, made some unusual discoveries, and experienced things that would have been difficult to imagine before the trip. But perhaps the greatest part of the journey was the journey itself. The endless roads, changing landscapes, unexpected stops, shared laughter, and all those small moments between the famous landmarks. 6,326 kilometers later, we returned with thousands of photographs, countless stories, and memories that will stay with us for a very long time. 5 travelers, Hanka, Libor, Andra, Luka, and Natalka from Czech Republic. 1 Jeep Wagoneer. 18 days. 1 incredible American adventure. And we wouldn't change a thing.